I think that in order to frame what is going on here today, I would like, first of all, to read it to you. It is a very short file. I will read it to you, first of all, in Yiddish, and you will hear it. How many people here know Yiddish? 1.5, 2, okay, good. 3 maybe. And then, what I suggest is that those will read it to you in English, and then I will start to speak about it. And I think we'll read it again, maybe in Czech also, if anybody. Is there anybody here? Yeah, for example, we can do it also. Okay. The poem has been translated to many languages by now. I think to 14 different languages, and you have here on one side Czech and English translation, and on the other you have the Yiddish, which is written in Hebrew letters, but it is a Germanic language, as you will notice very soon. And on the other hand, you can follow the transliteration. So if you also want to follow what I read in Yiddish, you can do it on the left side of that page. So you're not using from not just your ears, but your eyes will also be involved. Khurbn Aze. Inmitten Gräuel voran errege, wenn es lustig mir heute zu nehmen sich vom Klang. Punkt Demos, red a Stimme in mir. Wie kennst du lekenen dein Stamm, als Tränen als dein Jingels Back, der Monen dir in Khurbn Aze Mikdash. Wenn Khurbn Aze hebt sich an, gefinde ich sich in Guernica. Nicht metaphysisch, nicht figurativ, noch dort Mamisch, wie ein Tourist. Erfrischt hatte mit seinem Sohn und mit seinen Mamen in einen alten Karawan. Erfahren die Heim, es ist mehr Erd von allen Ländern in der Welt in dem Moment. Im Telefon der Mond mein Tate mir in alle Kovners Schuhe. Guernica auf jeden Berg. Ungeschrieben hat sie 1949, wie ein Aufruf auf der ersten Nakba. Wir fahren weiter bis auf Mai, Finisterre, Sof und Land. In Karawan in dem vermachten Reddich zu der Mittelwand, also zu sagen, mein Freund, in dein Namen und in meinem tut man das. And now, without any commentary or introduction, can you please go read the English translation to find the other side of it? Do you have a copy? You have a copy? Okay. It's back in the frame.
In the midst of horror comes a moment when I feel an urge to pull myself from the community. Just then, a voice inside me speaks. How can you deny your origin when the tears on your boy's cheek remind you of the destruction of the temple? When the destruction of Gaza begins, I find myself in Guernica, not metaphorically, not figuratively, but actually there as a tourist, a new father with his son and his mother in an old caravan, a mobile home more grounded than all the countries in the world at this moment. On the telephone, my father reminds me of Abba Kofner's line, "A Guernica on every hill." He wrote it in 1949 in response to the first Nakba. We drive on farther to the uttermost west, Finisterre, the end of the earth. In the caravan, shut tight, I talk to the eastern wall saying, "Shema Yisrael, in your name and in mine, they are doing this."
Very much so. That's an English translation by David Foreman, who I think is the first person actually after the poem was published, and said this must be translated into English, and then later many others came and did the same for other languages. It was published for the first time in January 26th on the oldest still existing Yiddish newspaper, easy newspaper. Now it's more a blog, right, a website. But it was founded in 1897 called Destruction. And I was very surprised that they published it, I have to say. I expected a rejection. And later the English translation was published, I think, a month later in another very important platform for Yiddish studies, which is called ENG. We will get to it there. So this is January 26. This is very late. The genocide has began, we can say, immediately after October 7. The question of periodization is very complicated, right? There were a lot of talk in the radical left about how exactly what exactly should be the name for what the Zionist regime does in Palestine. So apartheid is pretty much accepted to everybody. Ilan Pater as traditionally, already a tradition, proposed to call it ethnic cleansing, and the word genocide has been tossed around mainly hypothetically. I don't know many who spoke about genocide before the current attack on Gaza. And me myself, as Joe said, I grew up in Jerusalem. I was born in the United States, but I grew up in Jerusalem. And I left in 2008. In 2009, I wrote an essay that was called The Catastrophe is Approaching. And I described the fact that the left is constantly interested in finding solutions. Peace, 2 states, 1 state, no state, all the different positive solutions of what can come up out of the colonial situation or the apartheid situation in Palestine. And what I proposed in that essay was to ponder about what is the worst case scenario, what can happen. So what maybe is the reason why I left? Because if I believe that there is, let's say, a solution that resembles more or less what happened in South Africa, that was always the example that was given in the left. When I say the left, Israeli left, I speak about a very, very, very small group of people, not Zionist liberal left, but anti-Zionist radical left. That is really a handful of individuals. And I speak about genocide. I really read it. I never published it because I felt that it is more dangerous to publish it than to not publish. I felt that even to pronounce the possibility of genocide might historically aid the imagination that would lead there. But I also collected other voices in the left who spoke about the possibility. In fact, it was 2009, it was already after a major attack on Gaza. So this idea that Israel is actually playing with the world opinion and trying to see how far can it go, how low is the value of Palestinian life. And the idea was this is a genocidal blueprint, and it can lead to a full-fledged genocide. And this is the mindset in which I found myself on October 7th, in the sense that what is now going to happen, it didn't even start. I felt, okay, this is precisely my left, this is precisely what I saw. And the first impulse for me was to write. And it happened so that after October 7th, I was approached by so many friends asking me how am I doing, and especially how my mother, she lives in Jerusalem. She's Jewish Israeli. She lives in Jewish Israel. And I was very, very angered by this question. Also, not only angered, they were my friends. They really want to know how am I doing, and it is a legitimate question. But I was also angered by this question, and all the things that it hides and conceals. And I used to have very long telephone conversations with my friends, trying to explain to them the complexity and the nuances that I would like to add to the conversation when we speak about my or my family's well-being following the attack of Hamas on October 7th. And after the third, fourth conversation, I decided I cannot have this conversation anymore, so I wrote a text. And I would like to read to you a text that I wrote on October 11th. October 11th, so 4 days after the attack. And this is the text that I just sent to everybody who wrote to me, how are you doing? But I sent them the text. That was the easy way out of the conversation. Following the recent Hamas attack on October 7th, many people have reached out to me, concerned for the safety of my family and seeking to understand my view on the ongoing conflict between Palestine and the State of Israel. I have thus decided to put my feelings and thoughts in writing. My family and I live in safety, with access to essential services such as running water and electricity. Every evening, I can gaze at the sky without the constant fear of airstrikes. In this, I recognize my privilege. My empathy for Israelis, especially for innocent children suddenly deprived of the sense of security, runs deep. And my heart is heavy for the 2 million inhabitants of Gaza who live in increasing anxiety, fearing, and unprecedented Israeli retaliation. Years ago, I chose to leave the State of Israel, driven by security concerns and the belief that it would be irresponsible to start a family there. Over time, many of my loved ones did the same. While our reasons were deeply personal, collectively, they hint at a broader theme, the decolonization of Palestine. My late grandmother, a Holocaust survivor and staunch Zionist, confided in me that her generation failed to create a safe haven for Jews in the Middle East. She acknowledged that places like New York, Los Angeles, and even Berlin offer Jews a safer existence. This year, I celebrated my 15th Diaspora Day, a term coined by my partner to mark the day I started my new life in Europe. Had I believed 15 years ago in a peaceful coexistence between Jews and Palestinians, I might have stayed. But growing up in Jerusalem, I witnessed firsthand the transformations in Israeli society. To me, the 2000s painted a picture of a society that felt increasingly racist, violent, and with fascist leanings. Occupation mechanisms became more oppressive, and the apartheid regime solidified, subjecting the Palestinian population not only to physical harm, but also to constant humiliation and despair. The Hamas attack on October 7th was hardly unexpected. Israel's suffocating blockade of Gaza, the systematic devastation of its economy and infrastructure, and indiscriminate bombings have bolstered Palestinian resistance. This attack reflects their deep understanding of Israeli society and military strategies. History shows us that when the oppressed are pushed to the brink, they can react in ways unexpected and destabilizing to their oppressors. The characterization of the attack as barbaric resonated with many, yet it's essential to understand the context from which such actions arise. The glaring power imbalance between the colonizer and the colonized can lead the latter to resort to methods that seem particularly brutal. Historically, colonizers have viewed distant warfare as more honorable, preferring the distant cannon to close combat, or the aerial bomb to direct confrontation. However, it's not just material disparities driving these actions. It's the accumulated pain, humiliation, and despair of the oppressed. The extreme measures taken by resistance groups are not just a reaction to oppression, but are also strategic. While groups like Hamas can't match the Israeli army in firepower, the psychological impact of their actions can be profound, challenging the oppressor's sense of invulnerability and security. Attempts to attribute this attack solely to Hamas's Islamic efforts, to Netanyahu's personal agenda, or the far-right leanings of the Israeli government are simplistic. History is replete with examples of oppressed populations resorting to violence. The nature of the conflict's resolution remains uncertain, but the belief that occupation and apartheid can persist indefinitely without repercussions is a dangerous illusion. For many Israeli Jews, living outside the State of Israel is not only an ethical choice, but also a pragmatic one. for a safer platform. Yeah, we read a lot. I read it again now to you. That's the first time I actually read it public because it is a personal text I sent to friends. And I think, oh my God, for this I can go to prison basically in Germany, right? I am not legitimizing violence. I do not think that violence is a good thing. But it is an attempt to understand the historical mechanisms that operate and that invite us as individuals to act accordingly. Yeah. Okay. So this is the context. And afterwards, what happens was something that can only be understood as a deep feeling of isolation and, loneliness. And this is something that later I found out I shared with a lot of Palestinians, Palestinian colleagues and other anti-colonial activists. But in my case, as an Israeli Jew in the diaspora, radical as I may be, I suddenly saw that all of my partners, literally everybody that I used to speak with about apartheid, about the idea that two-state solution is an illusion, it is already one state, and we need to reform it and give full citizen rights to everybody who's under Israeli control. All of these, I'm not sure if everybody knows what I'm talking about, but, the radical leftist conversation that I remember myself in cafe houses in Berlin, sitting with other Israeli Jewish activists and sharing these ideas, and it was clear that we are all agreeing on that, and all of them switched in a day, literally. And the wave of ultranationalism, of people saying, I once was a left. There's a name for this. It's called the sobering up. The people who sobered up. It's a bit of, actually, a pejorative, right? It's a pejorative coming from the right. At least all of those leftists who sobered up, right? This is something that happens really in 24 hours. That I personally, and again, I'm not the victim here, but I'm still sharing a very personal experience with you. I felt completely alone, even in my family. It took, for example, my father a month or two to understand nuances that I spoke to him about. I used to tell him, look, when they go the streets of Europe with the pictures of the hospitals, with their names, telling the particular stories of each and every hospital and showing how horrible, and it is horrible, no question about it, but the discursive effect of doing that is dehumanization of Palestinians, because they do not have a story, they do not have a name, they are dust. They can be not calculated. Until today, you see the president of the state of Israel reacted to the arrest warrants that were issued by Haidna against the Israeli political leaders, and saying the Hague courts disregard the 100 hostages that are like. And of course, we don't need to speak about it. I think everybody in the room understands how it works, but being Israeli Jewish and growing up in a family with all of the baggage and all of the trauma that comes with it, and to understand how from a consciousness of a people who was the victim of genocide, one has to deal with the fact that these are the people committing a genocide. This takes I have to say, I have also empathy. I understand that my father, it took him a month, and I'm actually feeling very lucky that I can speak to my father, and now we get it. That, many people think like we don't have this in their family. But this loneliness was extremely devastating. And throughout those months, I've been trying to put in writing my feelings And everything failed. I tried to write in all my languages. I tried to write in Hebrew. How can I write in Hebrew? I tried to write in English, so I tried to publish in this text. Nobody wanted it. Even radical newspapers, don't want to name names, they conveniently didn't read it and came to me back a couple of weeks later and said, wonderful text, but it's a bit too late now, right? Like, okay, I understand this. So I tried to, in German, of course, how can I write in German, right? And at a certain point, I realized what I need to do is to write it in Yiddish. And this is an interesting point of the conversation that we might come back to why Yiddish. And that also I began with prose, I began with an essay, and then I said, the only thing that I can get out is a poem. And I would like to read with the poem, like line by line, and explain to you, because I'm sure that there are a lot of things there that might be interesting. So the context is extremely autobiographical. Okay, when my son was born, 3 months after my son was born, my partner and I and the son went on 5 months vacation in a caravan. We went from Germany to France, and then along the coast, Spain, Portugal, Spain again, Italy. Switzerland was fantastic. And the 7th of October was a couple of days after we crossed the border to Spain. So we were in Basque Club, or in San Sebastian, I don't know if everybody knows geography of Spain. And a couple of days we were in Guernica, which is mentioned in the part. Guernica, for those who do not know, is the city that was bombed on the wish of General Franco by the German Luftwaffe in April 1937, and that was the first scientific, let's say, experiment in bombing a civilian population, and created an extreme outcry at such a military action of using sophisticated bombs, and throughout 10 minutes destroying a complete town. Very important. The town of Guernica has very important symbolic values to the Basque national identity, and which was to be crushed by the fascists. And it became a symbol of the Civil War, Spanish Civil War, a symbol of the fight against fascism, of the cruelty of fascism. And Guernica, we will get to that when we read the poem. So I was in Guernica and saw, that was the time where crying was like a daily activity. And we went through all the commemoration and the museums and seeing everything that happened there. And at one point we see like it was a room of commemoration where they put pictures from the past and the present, and you can see them like black and white turning into color as a way of showing people that what happened so many years ago happened here. It's like making it concrete. And then there was a door, and we heard some noise, and I thought it was the continuation of the exhibition, so I opened the door. It was a bar, and the bar had a TV on. And I looked at the TV, and I see Destruction Gaza. And this just drove me crazy. That we are in Guernica reading about all of this, and the commemoration tries to make it concrete for us, because how can people remember something that happened in 37? And you open the TV set and you just see Guernica 100 times. Okay, so this is the context on where and why and when I wrote the poem. Now I would like to go with you a bit in the poem, if you don't mind. So, we will leave the epithet for later. My heart is in the east, and I am in the uttermost west, written by Yehuda Levi, was a medieval Hebrew poet in Spain. I will return to it later. It was not part of the original poem. It was a smart suggestion by a translator, because he didn't know how to translate something that comes later in the poem. Let me add this as a quotation in the beginning. and then other translators followed suit, as you can see also in the Czech version on the left. So, first of all, the poem has a misleading title, because the title, The Destruction of Gaza, announces a poem that would maybe describe the destruction of Gaza, which is precisely what the poem does not do, and I don't think that it can do. This is part of the problems of representation, especially at the moment in which the atrocity is just every day, even like really every day, they surpass the imagination of how cruel can people be. And who am I? How can I describe the reality of what is happening in Gaza? And again, this brings it back to the beginning of the conversation. I feel a bit weird here to speak to you as if my psyche is so important or my feelings are so important, because I feel that I am not the victim. I do not belong to the groups of victims. On the contrary, I belong to a group of people who became this incredible people who are both at the same time historical victims of genocide and perpetrators of genocide. And this is mind-blowing. This is very difficult to understand. And maybe the poem is interesting in that sense, help understand it. Okay. So, as you can see, it intertwines temporalities in the midst of horror. So, in the middle of something. And then later, as we go in the poem, the third stroke, when the destruction of Gaza begins, and then at the very end, we have the end of the earth. So basically, the temporality is not linear. We have a middle, a beginning, and an end, and in between, a list of historical references that are not sure all of them are well known for everybody. So let's go line by line. So first of all, in the first line, in the midst of horror comes a moment when I feel an urge to pull myself from the community. In Yiddish, it is a traditional translation from a text that we say in the Haggadah, in the Haggadah, which is the ritual text that is read during the Passover ritual. Everybody knows of Passover here? That's like the Jewish, how do you say? Easter. The Jewish Easter. Exactly. And Pesach in Czech. Pesach. You say Pesach in Czech. Okay. Also in Hebrew. Okay. And there is a story about four sons. And one is the good son, and is asking about ritual, and parents answer him. The second one is the wicked one. The third one is the one who is a bit naive or stupid. And the fourth one is the one who does not know how to even act. And it's four pedagogical strategies of how to deal with transmitting tradition from generation to generation. And the second one, the wicked one, is the one who says, this is not my, these commandments do not concern me, I don't understand. Like they concern you, they don't concern me. And the text says that since he considers the commandments of the ritual not his own, he has taken himself out of the community. Okay, this is like after Klal. Klal is not just community; it's the Jewish community. And this is the beginning. The beginning is, how can I continue to be Jewish? How can I continue to belong to this people? How can, like, there is this urge, this fantasy, desire, that is a very long and old desire by Jews in Europe, especially. They have to stop being Jewish, just to, go to church and get it over with. And this is, of course, the beginning, and this is not how the poem ends, and preach conversion. But it is so hard that the reflex of just leaving, being the wicked son of Pesach, and leaving the community, this is the premise. And of course, it is impossible. Why? A voice inside me speaks. How can you deny your origin? And here, there's an alliteration in Yiddish. Stim is voice, Stam is origin, not sure if it is translatable in Czech or Yiddish. I'm not sure. You can do a parallel analysis of translation. When the tears on your boy's cheek remind you of the destruction, next line, of the temple. Khurbn von dem ersten Beis Hamikdash. Okay, so the destruction of the temple, I think this is an historical reference that is more or less known. There have been two temples, two destructions, and these are the two traumatic moments in Jewish collectivity. There's one destruction, the Babylonian destruction, it's 586 BC, and another one at the year 70 by the Romans. And these are the two tragic moments in Jewish collectivity and are remembered. Both of them also happens traditionally on the same day, and the commemoration of this day is the commemoration of the greatest calamity. But the word Khurbn, which means destruction, also has a very specific connotation in Yiddish. And this is the first problematization that I'd like to make today to the vocabulary that we know for Jews. So do we say in Czech Shoah? Is it also Holocaust? How do you say in Czech? Holocaust. People say Shoah. Exactly. It feels like, Shoah is the right term, because then I'm using the word of the victims, right? I'm using the word of the people who experienced it, which is 100% bullshit, if I may say, because 5 out of 6 million of the Jews who were exterminated in the Nazi genocide spoke Yiddish, and in their language, the word is Khurbn, destruction. And they see the destruction of European Jewry by the Nazis, and symbolically, a third destruction after the first, second, and the third. So it is a historization of the genocide. The genocide, the genocide, the Nazi genocide of Jews is not outside the realm of history. I'm speaking now from a Yiddish perspective. It is very theological. It is very epic, but it is within an historical memory. And, of course, it is an affirmation of the diaspora, in the sense that unlike the Zionist negation of the diaspora, thinking the Jews cannot live a full life in the diaspora, and they have to go to the status of the land of Israel in order to become full Jews. To term the genocide a Khurbn is to say that this Ashkenazi, Yiddish-speaking Jewish civilization in Europe has reached such a degree of cultural sophistication and very intellectual and artistic and whatever adjective you would like to add here, that would make it qualify as a temple, as the temple that we don't need in Jerusalem. That's their first, right? We can have it in Europe, and it has been destroyed. That which has been destroyed is not this weak Jews, according to the Zionists. Those who were destroyed, that is equivalent to the third temple. And you also say in Yiddish, the third destruction, or Khurbn Europa, the destruction of Europe, the three terms. So I'm by breaking the line here, I refer to the word Khurbn. And this is maybe a lot of people spoke about the post-traumatic reaction to October 7th and how people lost their minds because Jews, post-trauma. A lot of spoke about pogroms. I think it's great. Pogroms is precisely a situation in which there's a massacre of the minority by the majority. Pogrom, to say that what happened in 7th October is a pogrom, is just denial of the situation of, for example, pogroms that happened in Ukraine, in many other places, with Jews who were a persecuted minority. But this is beside the point. A lot of people have instrumentalized the genocide, the Nazi genocide, in order to call Hamas Nazis and to say, okay, so if they're Nazis, now we can take revenge. And in many senses, it's correct. The genocide that is taking place now is also a product of, I would say, a psychotic fantasy of revenge. But this is not the only way in which you can react to a trauma. this is not the only way in which you can position yourself vis-a-vis these very difficult to grasp atrocities. And when I say, I want to get out of this community, I'm so ashamed of what is being done in my name, but I cannot get out of this community, because when my son cries, I am remembering the destruction of the temple. So it is a profoundly Jewish movement for me, and this is no exaggeration, it is true. It is really what is happening to me. My relationship with my son makes it impossible to renounce Judaism. And I struggle, and the struggle continues. When the destruction of Gaza begins, so it's the same word. I'm not sure, I don't think it's the same word in Czech. It's the same word. Destruction, home, destruction, the Holocaust. The destruction of the temple, home, Beis Hamikdash, and the destruction of Gaza. I'm using the same word. So the title is The Destruction of Gaza, which is also, before we move on, if it is indeed also a Holocaust, I have said that many words that were called as home plus a name of a place. Also before the genocide. Yeah, a lot of the books written about pogroms, about the destruction of Jewish life has been destroyed many times in many places, and this is like a trope to speak of the Khurbn Aze. Here I'm referring to the Khurbn Aze, not a place inhabited by Jews in particular. And yet, in some ways, and I think is very much so the case, it is the fourth destruction. And I'm saying it with a lot of trying to be careful, because I don't want to make, it's also very tempting to make it a Jewish story. Again, to make Palestinians visible as if we have such an interesting theology and history here to unravel. And I'm saying it to you, because I'm not sure if there are Jews in the public. Don't ask. But when I say this is the fourth destruction, it is really an internal thing. I'm saying it as a Jew, and I wrote this poem also in Yiddish initially, and I referred it to Jews. And for me, it is important to understand what is happening in Gaza. Now, what's happening in Palestine? We are witnessing the complete destruction, of course, of the Zionist project. It's the beginning of the end, in my opinion. But never has the Jewish people been so threatened conceptually. Like, how can we survive this? How can these people survive? Morally, ethically. These are questions that really, what language am I going to speak with my son? What am I going to tell him? How can I always, yes, but we're not like this. Yes, but we are against it. Yes, but this is not what defines us. These are crucial questions. So the destruction of Gaza is for me all of this theology and history as well. It's not just the destruction of the city, it's a genocide, and it's a destruction with all of the volume of this word home. Okay. So when the destruction of Gaza begins, I find myself in Gazy. And not metaphorically, not figuratively, but actually there. This is true. The tourist, new father with his son and his mother, with an old caravan, mobile home, more grounded than all the countries in the world at this moment. More grounded. In Yiddish it says, was is mehr Erd, which is more earth. And earth is land of Israel. And this is the diasporic moment in the poem. Yeah, that the caravan, the mobile home, is more of a home. For me, it's normal. I try to live the diasporic life in general. But in this moment, there is a home. There is no home. Also, considering the complicity of all the places in which I live, so I live between Germany and France, and the feeling of homelessness is at least we're in the caravan. There's like sort of a consolation, and again, I'm trying to be very factual and documentary, right? No metaphors, no figures. I'm a tourist. I'm not in Guernica in some metaphysical way. I'm just in Guernica. On the phone, my father reminds me of Ave Kovner's line, a Guernica on every hill. Ave Kovner. Not sure how many people here have heard the name Ave Kovner? 1, 2, 3, 4. Extraordinary person. Ave Kovner was a partisan during the Second World War. He famously spread a proclamation in the ghetto of Vilnius, in which he, maybe for the first time, said, Hitler has plans to exterminate all of us. It's not just here, it's all the Jews of Europe. And if we do not fight back, then it is as if we go as sheep to the slaughter. Let us not go as sheep to the slaughter. And the same Al-Kovner, immediately after the war ended, he managed to survive it, as a partisan, has founded, together with others, a group of avengers. It's called Nakam. It was a group that believed that the only Jewish reaction to the genocide is to kill, if possible, 6 million Germans. And they shipped poison. The plan was to poison the drinking water in major reservoirs in Germany. He was arrested in his work. And they had a different plan to poison SS convicts, like SS. How do you say not convict? There's a word for this. Prisoners. Here. They poisoned bread. The sex officers got sick, but nobody died. But he was very serious about killing. Like revenge. Very, very interesting person. He also testified in the Nuremberg trials. Very important testimony. And he was a poet, both in Yiddish and in Hebrew, maybe a bit more famously in Hebrew. And this is a line from a poem that he wrote in 1949 in the south of Palestine, where he saw the devastation of the Nakba, where he saw the violence and basically saw expulsion. So the Nakba, we need to explain what the Nakba is. This audience, everybody knows what I'm talking about. Nakba. That's how Palestinians refer to the Israeli independence, right? The expulsion and the ethnic cleansing in Palestine in 47, 48. And in a moment of deep honesty and humanism, very Zionist, Abba Kovner refers to the landscape of Palestine as a Guernica on every hill. As if the Luftwaffe had bombed every hill. Which is, of course, an exaggeration in the sense that whatever the Israeli army did, the Zionist Israeli army, paramilitary, also the Israeli army already complicated story how it was carried out. There were no bombings, there were no termination bombings like in Guernica. There were massacres. There were massacres. But not to the extent of Guernica. But for him, he wanted to use the strongest image. And he goes to the Spanish Civil War. Very strong concept of the republicanism and also anarchism, communism, all the alliance against Franco. Guernica on every hill, and that's a huge accusation against the violence in which Israel got independence. And my father is a literary scholar, right? That's what he does. He teaches Hebrew literature, and when I'm in Europe, he tells me, oh, Abba Kovner wrote this line, and Abba is Abba, in Hebrew is father. It also works when you understand it through Hebrew. And it's all about what poem is clearly about generations, father and son, my father, I have a son, and question of transmission. And he transmits to me this, line of poetry by a person who participated in the Nakba, but also participated as a partisan. He makes the link. Biographically, he makes the link. And he gives the image that is horrific, much more touching than what is happening right now. Guernica on every hill, Guernica everywhere, like 1,000 Guernicas, 1,000, more than that. And now if you just count the kilograms of explosives, this is unprecedented happening now. I told myself not to give statistics, not to talk about facts, because it does, keep it in the world of ideas. What did you say? The faculty of philosophy paid for this?
Just for the other.
Exactly.
Science.
Science. Okay, yeah, good. We need to laugh. So basically, this is we have the Holocaust survivor in the middle of the poem, basically, who acknowledges the Nakba. And am I saying that what happened in Gaza is the country? No, my father said it. And I report it in my poem. We drive on farther to the uttermost west, Finisterre, the end of the earth. So there are several places in Europe that is called Finisterre. I'm referring to the one that is closest to Santiago de Compostela. So it's at the end of Spain, like northwest Spain, the Finisterre, and Latin, for those of you know, the end of the earth. And it is a poem that is written in movement. It took me several months, right? It just published in January. I started much before. So moving to the west, the uttermost west, soft minor. So I'm using in Yiddish the two words in Hebrew. Both of them exist in Yiddish, but as an idiom, soft minor, soft ma'arav, this is a direct citation from Yehuda Levi that you can find in the top. My heart is in the east, and I am in the uttermost west. And again, I'm using him with some difficulties. Yehuda Levi lived, I think, in the 11th century in Spain. Very interesting philosopher and poet. But in many ways, a racist nationalist. And one of the earliest people who conceptualized Jewish identity in terms of race and in terms of its superiority over other, he's a very problematic figure. And of course, he means it completely differently, right? He is in Spain, which he considers the end of the West, the uttermost West. Uttermost is not a good translation, I have to say. The end of because Finisterre is the end of the land. It's the end. So end has this double meaning, right? The edge, but also the end. And I'm in Spain, and my heart is in the east. My heart is in Gaza, in a completely different setting, psychological setting. The longing for Yehuda Levi was starved of the Zionists 1,000 years later, right? They used him as a proto-Zionist. And the end of the earth, like the name of this place in Spain, the end of the land, Finisterre, the end of the land. Yeah, again, the translation misses here the point, in my opinion. This is something a lot of people miss. I truly see what is happening in Gaza, also at the end, complete end of the place in which I grew up. which I don't visit. Last time I was there was in 2009. I don't feel any nostalgia to it, but I have empathy for certain individuals in my family, certain friends still live there, and even if I don't believe in that project. If I accept that it was a wrong thing to answer the Jewish question in Europe with a colonial answer. It was wrong, and it is wrong, and we see where it led. But I'm also crying and I'm also lamenting the complete destruction of the place in which I grew up, because there is no more. I cannot, to go to the land of genocide? There is no possibility. There is no possibility for this place to be considered a home. I'm saying this especially for those who reacted to this poem and saw it as a pro-Palestinian poem that takes the other side and makes me a traitor. I have no problem being called pro-Palestinian, but I'm not taking the other side. This is an extremely Jewish poem. It has been written in Yiddish, describing a historical Jewish perspective and lamenting, despite the genocide, lamenting the end of this state, which I think is a criminal state. But at the same time, I can lament the fact that it now destroys itself. Not just Palestinian lives, it also destroys itself. And that one does not take from the other. It's different kinds of destruction. This, of course, cannot be heard by many. Okay, let me finish. In the caravan, shut tight, I talked to the eastern wall, saying Shema Yisrael in your name and in mine. They are doing it. So this is very dense. First of all, the caravan shut tight is a reference to a very famous poem by Dan Paggis. He was a Hebrew poet, Holocaust survivor, who wrote maybe the most well-known Holocaust poem in Hebrew. Very short, let me read it to you. A very, very long, short poem. I wish to use the English translation of the poem. Let's find it. Yeah. Written in pencil in the sealed freight car. Here in this car, I am Eve with my son Abel. If you see my older boy, Cain, son of Adam, tell him that I. So written in pencil in the sealed freight car. So in Hebrew, it's just written in pencil in the Farmaster wagon, in the shut van. Here in this van, here in this car, I am Eve, the mother of all humans, with my son Abel. If you see my older boy, Cain, son of Adam, tell him that I, and then the consequence. Which is there's a lot to say about this poem, right? That both the mother and the son are being sent in a train car to extermination, and she writes a poem or a letter to Cain. Like universal categories. The murder is something universal. All good? This time? Okay. And this is also a bit, I read it and I criticize myself in a way. I'm in the caravan, shut tight. So if this is a reference to the Farmaster wagon, to the sealed freight car. And what am I? Am I a Holocaust victim now? Am I putting myself in this position? So the caravan is a home, but it is also a place of post-trauma, and it has an eastern wall, not a wailing wall. A lot of translators got this wrong. They're very interesting, because I was in contact with all of them, and they thought it's the wailing wall. That's the western wall, the wall in Jerusalem that in today the whole time many Jews. No, the eastern wall is a completely different concept. Every synagogue in Ashkenaz, in Europe, has an eastern wall. And this is the most important wall in the synagogue because it faces Zion, faces Jerusalem. So on the one hand, let's say Zionists. Of course it's not, it's Diasporic. Because it means that you can sublimate the being in the land of Israel to being in a synagogue and facing, it's like in Islam that you face Mecca, right? It is there's a diasporic idea that when everywhere in the world, wherever you are, you can always face Mecca. It doesn't matter. You can be in the United States, you can face Mecca. So the eastern wall is this. So the caravan is also a synagogue. And also, it's interesting because whenever it turns, the eastern wall changes, right? So it's a dynamic or a changing, not just a mobile home, it's a completely relative synagogue. It doesn't even have a fixed directional reference. And also the fact that it's shut is that I'm speaking and I don't know if anybody can hear me.